actually start recording. Good morning. It is, April 6th, 2021. It's approximately 3:49 a.m. here in Seattle. I haven't done one of these in a while. I have been playing, Minecraft and talking over that. Prior to that, Islanders was really the go-to. Interspersed, we've mixed in a couple other things, but yeah, it's been a while. when I was picking out the ambient track, I remembered someone talking about the series always bothering them because it makes them need to pee. Dog, go pee. Go pee. I'll be here. Stream's not going anywhere. I'm helping your body regulate. When you're older, you'll miss the days where it was predictable. Yeah, I've been doing fairly well lately. Things have really stabilized for me financially and materially, and really show no signs of changing until September, which is great. It's really great. I'm still living that quarantine life, though. Apparently, somewhere around almost a third of Americans, 30-something% of Americans, have received at least one vaccination shot, which is an outstanding statistic. I heard that yesterday. Have I actually looked it up? No, it would behoove me to do so before repeating that. Percentage of Americans vaccinated. As of 4 days ago, it was around 17% of the population. So it must be 30% of the eligible population? Because that's a big issue. Yeah, 15, 16, it's around 17, 18%. You just straight up lied to me, previous news source. Still, that's an outstanding number. I won't be eligible for vaccination until April 15th at the earliest, which is when Washington State goes into anyone over the age of 16. The difficulty at that point will be naturally finding and scheduling it, because I imagine there will be something of a rush at that point, anyway. And even with the rising vaccination rate, I'm troubled by this urgency to, quote, return to normal, and this lack of awareness to lessons to be taken away from this. There's such a substantial in corporate media, in political offices, there's so much language to returning to normal, or going back to normal, or building back better, or whatever, but not to taking the time to substantially mourn our losses, to really emotionally engage with this substantial degree of loss, both literal loss of lives, but also this loss of a sense of invulnerability. And, I think that loss of a sense of invulnerability, I'm speaking to the spirit of American exceptionalism. exceptionalism. I recall quite vividly in early March of last year, when I was still working, I was speaking to a very intelligent resident of where I lived, or where I worked, and we were talking about COVID. And he's like, yeah, sure, it seems like it's a problem over in China, but there may be a few cases here, but this is America. America, we'll be fine. It's just a stunning contrast. I imagine if I tracked down the same person, had a conversation with him now about it, his attitudes would change. His attitudes would change because he was a liberal, not a conservative. I imagine that spirit of invulnerable exceptionalism, of American strength, of bootstrapism, it's still alive and well in the populace that are paranoid or hesitant or unconvinced at the efficacy or necessity of a vaccine, in those that have been saying not to live their lives in fear repeatedly for the course of the last 13 months. That spirit of ignorance, that belligerent arrogance that's so defining of American character, it's taken a blow. But not, I think, a mortal blow. I'm terrified of what comes next. I'm terrified of capitalism continuing unabated, at small mitigations and efforts being made, lip service being paid, but in effect, nothing substantially changing. Not for me personally. I'm not afraid for me personally. I have done, honestly, much better than I should have during this pandemic. I had a job that I quit. I was not fired. I was not laid off. I still qualified for unemployment because I quit for moral reasons. And unemployment has maintained my standard of living. More or less. I mean, there have been some notable hiccups, but I have been protected and benefited from this system. And a lot of that has to do with I'm a very lucky person, but also I enjoy a great degree of social privilege. In subtle ways, in not so subtle ways. And when I think about how fortunate I've been, or resilient I've been, or whatever else, I can't help but try to consider the ways in which these privileges, these advantages that I not always have, that I don't always have in the forefront of my mind, let's say, that these things have made life easier for me. I had a dream last night. I had a couple of dreams, actually. One was I was wandering through the dream version of the building where I used to work, looking at all the things that weren't getting done because I wasn't around anymore. It wasn't this specific last job, but kind of just amalgamation of previous workplaces and all the small things I would do that nobody would ask for kind of just laid barren for me. That was an interesting one. Not really, emotionally substantial, but just kind of, I don't know, it left an impression of the marks we leave on the world, even unwittingly, even unknowingly. The echoes of our absences. The other dream, the one that was more emotionally impactful, and I'm sure there were more than just two dreams, but these were the two that stuck with me, involved me flying to Atlanta, Georgia. I've been to Atlanta I may have driven through it once. But going to Atlanta with a leftist organization in order to set up a mutual aid organization there. I honestly could not tell you why Atlanta or why this organization. But, there were maybe 12, maybe, around a dozen of us individuals who'd flown down from different parts of the country and were starting a mutual aid co-op in Atlanta. Now, it's really weird because ideally you do mutual aid where you already live. You don't export it. It's not like... Well, I mean, I guess you could export it, but maybe if you go to, a crisis area, but Atlanta's not necessarily in crisis. I mean, politically, sure, but not materially, not more so than usual. I don't know, I'm not really in the know about Atlanta day to day or even yearly goings on. So it was really weird that it was there, but the thing that stuck with me about the dream was this feeling of satisfaction, of helping other people, of building something, of working together, and how much I miss that, and how much I'm longing for that. I've tried so hard in the work that I've done and gotten paid for professionally to try to find that same sense of fulfillment. And in all honesty, it really has not been there. There have been rare, brief moments and instances of satisfaction. But the knowledge that ultimately my occupations have been for profit, and at some level, with the exception, I think, of the escape room company, have been exploitative. The escape room company was, I think, exploitative of my labor in order to be able to generate a profit, but their margins really weren't that high. They were reasonably fair. Yeah, I in the dream, in fact, we were having a round table meeting, a literal round table meeting, around a fucking coffee table. We had all gotten to this small apartment unit complex kind of thing, a series of a few small apartments that we were going to be living and working out of that we had bought, I guess, which is really pie in the sky for a group of leftist millennials throwing that much money together. But people pointed out that I wasn't wearing a mask, and I had that, oh shit, kind of dream. I haven't had a lot of oh my god, I forgot my mask dreams in the last year, but this is, I don't know, the second or third that I've remembered. And I woke up feeling very torn. I haven't been volunteering or doing much directly myself. Not since really the peak of the George Floyd protests. I have not been out in person because the mental arithmetic in my mind, I don't know, if I'm a potential vector for a disease, going out in public seems like something I shouldn't do. That it's more effective to provide people who are more experienced, more efficient, more entrenched is the word that came to mind, but that's not really the word I want. More, I don't know, who already know and what they're doing and active in what they're doing. It would be more beneficial to financially support them so that they can materially impact the community and reduce the potential, footprint of the be one less potential disease vector in not being there physically. I don't really know if that maths out, but that's really the rationale I've been going with. And I think, well, speaking for myself, I've always had this notion, this spirit of, oh, once thing is over, I can do goal. Next school year, I'll try harder. I'll be on time. I'll do all my work. But this year, nah. I'll start the diet tomorrow. But today, yeah, I'm just gonna cheat a little. Oh, I'll do the dishes tomorrow, or I'll grab the laundry once this episode is over. Just one more thing. Just put it off and put it off and put it off. And it's really an undesirable quality to have. In a lot of ways, right? And I think if I'm being honest with myself, looking at and thinking about the idea of being more directly, materially, physically active in terms of mutual aid and direct support and direct action in political organizing and activism, I'm really going to have to break out of my comfort zone quite a bit. I get decent amounts of social anxiety, not in the moment. When I'm talking with someone, I'm perfectly coherent, cogent, I think somewhat charismatic. But in anticipating interactions, that's where I start breaking down a little bit. And overanalyzing, and yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. Now, I've had this notion of like, well, I'm not working. Now would be the perfect time to volunteer. But the whole pandemic thing. So maybe let's say I managed to get my first shot by the end of April. So by the end of May, fully vaccinated. That's June, July, August, and September that I'm still on unemployment. And provided that the requirements stay as they are, I don't even need to be applying to new positions to stay on it. That's 4 months of paid volunteering, essentially, that I can be doing. I could volunteer at a couple of the local museums I really like. I mean, I'm right next door to a couple. I'm talking about volunteering in the context of, like, the non-profit industrial complex, or the non-profit complex, right? Which are ostensibly organizations that exist for the public good and arguably do public service, but exist in a manner by which they perpetuate themselves. They do not address the root causes of the needs that they address. They just address the needs. They're a symptom alleviation. They're not a cure, right? Like a food bank. A food bank feeds hungry people. That's good and important work. The more fundamental work is, why are there hungry people? Nonprofits will not address that root cause, because that root thing is capitalism. And even if the issue is homelessness, these organizations employ small ones, dozens of people, large ones, thousands of people. And these thousands of people's livelihoods are dependent on the continuation of the crisis that they are addressing. You can see the conflict of interest here, because materially, people are getting their needs met by doing this thing. Now, I, for the most part, do not wish to disparage organizations, except maybe the Salvation Army, in terms of the work that they do or their stated or aimed goals. Organizations like the Salvation Army that treat it like a morality crisis, homelessness is a morality crisis more so than a systemic issue, yeah, I'll take issue with. Especially if you look at just how rampant abuse cases are against the people who seek shelter with them. And I'm sure that's probably the case with many other organizations, but Salvation Army gets a big footprint in media anyway. I don't know, like, some city councilors, mine particularly, he's not great. He could be a lot worse, but he's not great. Has been pushing an initiative of like, oh, we'll solve the unhoused crisis with tiny homes. I'm like, you know, this isn't gonna work. The real problem is housing is not a right. There are not enough social programs that are housing first programs. And really those two things, I mean capitalism, but those first two things are pretty contingent. There are too many housing zoning, there we go, zoning is the word I want. The zoning laws allow for, or don't allow for, enough high density housing. We need more high density housing. We need to, here's a shout out to Lorax from Left Flank Vets, get rid of our fucking golf courses and put some fucking housing there. We don't have many, admittedly, in Seattle, but we do have a couple that are pretty substantially sized. And truly, we live close enough to beautiful country out to the east that it just really makes sense to move large-scale private green spaces like golf courses out of the city to maintain our public green spaces, maybe even expand them within the city. But yeah, point being, what I was wrapping around to was, because of this tiny house push, let's say, there may be potential opportunity to get involved with that in some capacity. But, you know, I don't really have a strong background in engineering or manufacturing. You know, my grandparents on both sides own farms. So, you know, I know how to use tools that you might find in an average toolbox. Like, I can put furniture together, I can screw in or wrench in plumbing. I can follow instructions, but, you know, I'm no electrician, I'm not a plumber, I'm not a carpenter, I'm not a woodworker, I'm not, you know, a metal worker. I don't have these expertises. So I don't really know if that's a barrier to entry or not. I imagine it's not. So yeah, I've been thinking about this potential to volunteer for a while, and I'll be honest with you, a big part of like why I haven't been doing more going out masked is I I my glasses get fogged up fucking immediately. Yes, I have the nose of my mask pinched. Yes, I put my glasses like an inch further up on the mask, which makes it hard to see. Like, I just get blinded if I'm doing any kind of... If my respiration goes up, foggy glasses. You know, okay, maybe get glasses that are more resistant to fogging. Sure, but that would require me going to my optometrist, and that doesn't seem like an emergency, and I'm really just trying to observe a self-imposed quarantine as much as possible. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I've been getting so impatient this month and last month thinking about vaccination. You know, the vast majority of 2020, I'm just like, everybody needs to shut up, sit down, and just find a way to keep busy, because this isn't going anywhere, right? And now, you know, this year, I'm finding it hard to be patient. I'm finding it hard to keep doing essentially nothing. You know, I've been busying myself this month by kind of reworking my apartment a little bit. And that's been satisfying. The second week of April, I should have my big-ass couch arriving that I'm gonna have to put together, so that'll keep me busy for, like, a day. Hopefully a day. Hopefully not more than a day. I laid out some new rugs this week, installed some new shelves, repotted a bunch of plants. I ordered more planters and seeds and plants. I installed a bidet, which is pretty fucking easy. It's the thing about anxiety, really, is you tend to work things up in your head to be bigger and scarier and harder and more than what they are. Whether it be in the difficulty of installing a bidet, which was you know, taxing because of the angle of the oh my god, inflow on the bidet, and what I was oh my god, a word for a piece of metal that water flows through that's not pipe. It's a flexible pipe. Angling that right was a pain in the ass, and I had to wrench and unwrench that like half a dozen times, and then turn the water on and see if it was a tight seal, and then get sprayed and turn the water off. Really easy. And if you know what you're looking at, I knew it wasn't a tight seal when I saw it. I'm like, that doesn't look right, but it's really not wanting to wrench on anymore, so like, maybe it's a bad angle. Let's just turn the water on and find out. But I was so apprehensive about the difficulty of it that I put off buying a bidet for like a year and a half. And recurringly, this is a thing in my life. You know, I talked earlier about my difficulty with procrastination. And when I think about procrastination and when I talk about procrastination, what context typically comes to mind is how procrastination, oh, you're a procrastinator. Oh, you know, the way that it's characterized as a personal failing, a vice, a personal issue. In the way that, God, all mental illness and suffering is in capitalism in the United States. Oh, something's wrong with you? Must be your fault. You know, it's not always so blatant, but that is typically the root rationale and reasoning behind the way we address so many causes, is we blame individuals rather than systemic issues. Yeah, I think a lot of my procrastination takes root in anxiety, in worry, in apprehension, in knowing subconsciously or unconsciously, non-consciously, that things are okay as is. Change runs the risk of not being okay, of being less comfortable, of being hurt, of being bad, of being embarrassed, of being whatever else. And I think I have a lot of growth to do there in terms of learning more effective strategies in addressing, attacking, coping, and you know, having a healthy internal dialogue regarding anxiety and apprehension, and finding a way to rationalize not making it a barrier, and get more excitement and enthusiasm and hope, I think, that things will go well. But of course, if you hope for something, you open yourself up to disappointment and hurt. And yeah, I'm getting more and more and more healthy and stabilized. But I definitely do carry a reasonable degree of trauma from a lot of emotional sources, a few more physical sources as well. What's weird about trauma is I'm pretty sure I have some degree of PTSD. Now, it's self-diagnosed, mind you, so take it with a big old grain of salt. But typically a healthy person does not react to flashbangs and tear gas with no emotional response whatsoever. Like, that's a trauma response. I don't understand my brain in fear and anxiety, because I get so worked up over trivial shit. But apparently, when things are exploding, less so. In those moments, I'm more concerned for the people around me, or the way that I internalize or process the information in the moment is, you know, I'm going into these interactions knowing that the police are violent and militant and will get away with using violence or accelerating the degree of a conflict or escalating a conflict. That's their modus operandi, right? That's just the way they operate. And, you know, I consent to being in that position. I'm educated, and I know what's gonna happen. So when it happens, I'm not like, oh fuck. I'm just like, here we fucking go. But also with this kind of emotional control in my brain of like, okay, what's important here is holding the line and not breaking this line, because if you break the line, then that puts people at risk. You know, a crowd is incredibly dangerous once it starts running. or stampeding. That's the last fucking thing you want. You want to hold the line. Even if you're retreating, okay, even if you are falling back to a different position, even if you are abandoning an offensive, you hold the line and you move that line back, step by step, step by step, step by step. And the reason you do that is so that you can't get rushed, none of your people can get grabbed, and your people don't hurt each other trying to outrun the son of a bitch next to them. Right? There's that adage about, like, you don't need to be faster than a bear, you just have to be faster than the guy next to you. And so that's what I kept in mind, is like, it's really important to keep at least the appearance of a formation, even if not the structure. And I take for granted a lot of knowledge that I have with regards to tactics, strategy, warfare, organizational structure, the ebb and flow of the movement of bodies, both like in a sports sense, but mostly in like a martial sense. I really do take that for granted. So it's particularly frustrating, had been frustrating, going to protests and seeing how amateurish and ignorant and naive is better than ignorant, naive a lot of the people there are, a lot of the participants are, a lot of the goals are. You know, there have been, I haven't been particularly active in Seattle because I don't understand materially what protests aim to accomplish. A lot of the issue that I take is a lot of the protests are very anarchist driven or radical liberal driven here in Seattle. My issue with an anarchist driven action, whether it be a protest, whether it be whatever else, is a lack of organizational structure. And I've talked ad nauseum about how I feel organizational structures are, in fact, desirable, useful, but if you're all just following the person with the loudest voice or the most natural charisma or a megaphone, if you have a bunch of people in a crowd that don't really know each other, they have not consented to a shared goal, a shared statement of intent, and a shared statement of means by which they will engage in that attempt, then you don't really have a movement. What you have is, the word that comes to mind is a mob. You have a crowd. And within a crowd, individuals can take action according to what they want, what they feel. And I don't think anarchism can effectively challenge the organized, institutionalized power structures that exist. I think you have to challenge power with power. And, of course I think this because I'm a fucking Marxist. But that's been a big stumbling block, too, in my willingness to stay engaged. Listen, if you are trying to take action against an occupying force, let's say, and I'm using occupying force here very intentionally as to not specify a specific entity or entities, and not specifying the context or the timing or anything else. I'm very intentionally using occupying force as a vague, though implied, specific entity, right? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to... There are a number of effective tactics. You can engage in holding actions and distractive actions like protests and demonstrations, which will consume a lot of the occupier's manpower in monitoring your movement, in monitoring your actions, in monitoring the large crowd, in trying to provide security for infrastructure, elites. So in order to kind of maximize your effect there, you do want this sort of mobbish, as many bodies as possible in as vulnerable an area as possible. Right? You want to go to where the money is. You want to go to large spaces where are moneyed interests that will call upon these occupying resources, because there's the assumption that the moneyed interests and the occupying resource or occupying source forces, words are hard, are in collaboration, right? Because otherwise there's direct opposition, and what we're talking about is completely different. You go to where they'll respond if you're just trying to use up manpower and time. Why would you just want to use manpower and time? Well, because maybe the occupying force uses violence judicially or liberally. And if they're focused on you, they're not hurting other people. Okay. Then a movement like an Occupy movement, or what was going on with Cal Anderson Park here in Seattle, will those start making sense? Right, what you're trying to do is divert attention and resources to containing you and focusing on you so that others can escape or go unobserved or go unchallenged. Right, what you're doing is distracting. You're garnering attention. You are a spectacle. You're being spectacular. And this is really the root of the notion of a popular protest in the United States, right? That's the goal, is to get attention. But in the United States, it's attention from the media, it's attention from politicians, it's attention from your fellow American, fellow citizen, so as to enact democratic change through our established political processes. Right, okay, if that's your goal, then fuck off, it doesn't work. Or it works way too slowly. If your goal is just to distract, now I'm on board with that. And you can peace police that all you want. You can have speakers, you can have megaphones, you can go the whole fucking 9 yards with it. But that will not remove the occupying force. It'll keep them occupied. It might tire them or frustrate them. But if you're talking about removing an occupying force, you need to look at their logistics. You need to look at their supply structure. How are they being fed? How are they getting water? What kind of transportation are they using? How is that transportation fueled? How is it maintained? What arms and armaments are they using? What munitions do they use? Etc., etc. You look at these material factors, these material conditions, how they are maintaining their occupation, literally how, what tools are they using, and then looking at ways that you can disrupt their access to or maximize their expenditure of these tools, ideally both. You draw them into confrontations where they tear gas entire communities, using up their entire stockpile. And then, not just that, you frustrate their attempts to acquire more, or you take advantage of this low stockpile and taking actions that armament will no longer be available for use on. You have a problem with bike officers, individuals on bikes, a bike gang, let's say, that have been effectively used to outmaneuver and box in people. Okay. How are these vehicles being maintained? It's not hard to look up. In the United States, it's really hard not hard to look up. Well, then you have I would not say I'm very specifically not saying a target here, but then you have, I don't know, a supply chain, right? You have a logistical network. And looking at and disrupting, that is a proven effective means at resisting occupying forces. Now, I really want to make an important distinction here. When I'm talking about occupying forces, I'm very specifically talking about individuals who are not from a community, who are in that community in order to enforce or maintain power. Not the community self-policing, not the community self-enforcing, but in bringing in operators, agents, provocateurs, what have you, from elsewhere in order to enforce the status quo. In these conditions, we can talk about and think about effective means by which to harry and frustrate their operations. There's a really fucking interesting, clever, effective conversation to be had there that's not being had. That's not fucking being had. You have people standing on fucking highways just to stop the flow of traffic, which is interesting and disruptive, but it wasn't even... that's not... It's not materially coming into conflict with the thing that you seem to take issue with. It's all for the interest in garnering public attention and hoping that that public attention galvanizes itself into a political movement by which legislatively you can change the way that things operate materially. You're really talking in 5-year, 10-year plans at that point. And the people on the ground in these protests who are motivated enough, who are driven enough, they're quite often very young people. I'm talking late teens, early 20s. They don't want change in 5 years, change in 10 years, change in 2 years. They want and need change immediately. I think that's why we see a great degree of protest burnout and political burnout, is especially when people participate in protests organized or endorsed by official political entities, whether they be nonprofit or otherwise. People want to be participating in something that's actually fucking doing something. And this is where a great source of my admiration for anarchists come through. Good anarchists. They don't wait. They don't wait for political apparatus. They say, okay, you need shoes, let's get you shoes. You need someplace safe to move, to live, let me help you find that. You need food, let me help you with that. Let's get you food. You need medical care, let's get you medical care. You haven't had a shower, let's get you a shower. Let's address this immediately. There's a need for both, right? As in all things, I don't think this is an either-or situation, but I'm so frustrated seeing leftists online, and by online I mean Twitter, and of course you're frustrated seeing leftists on Twitter because it's a bunch of young people who are really emotionally charged and frustrated. And it's not like you can go to school for how to effectively challenge the status quo. It's not like you can study this. It's not like you can, become effective at this unless you are a part of the state apparatus, in which case you're probably not interested in challenging the status quo. So there's a real brain drain kind of situation. There's a real lack of expertise. There's a lot of very willing, excited, driven people, but the lack of theory, the lack of tactics, the lack of planning is again and again evident, frustratingly evident. This has been quite a tangent. But God, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. It's been in my head for nearly a fucking year now. But I don't feel that it's really appropriate for me to be telling people how to protest or how not to protest. In fact, I think it's wildly inappropriate for that to be prescriptive in any way. I feel that maybe it's appropriate to say, okay, if your goal is X, then Y, Z, alpha, and beta might be effective strategies by which you can accomplish or address X. Right? Like, all these fucking pseudo-socialist, pseudo-leftists on Twitter that take every excuse to tear into organizations like the DSA. Build a better organization. That's it. Alright, you don't like what's in front of you? Do better. Organize an organization that better matches your ideals. Don't get frustrated and give up and just be like, well, I'm not doing anything because this group isn't good enough. That's how power stays entrenched. That's how the Democratic Party has effectively eliminated progressivism and socialism in the United States, even democratic socialism, which is redundant. Socialism, by its very essence, democratic. By its very nature, is democratic. This frustrated notion of, well, this isn't good enough, so I'm not going to do anything, is the way that you perpetuate power. If you are genuinely frustrated by what you see as flaws in an organization and cannot find an organization which seems to meet your criteria, I would encourage you to at least get organized and participate in the one that seems like the closest fit, and work on finding like-minded people within that organization, maybe changing that organization from within, or using your position there to form a caucus, to form a subsect of the organization that's more in line with your political beliefs. And then operating with this caucus, this group of like-minded people, you've effectively made a whole new organization using the organizational tools, infrastructure, and most importantly, resources that individually you do not have available to yourself. You can then use these resources to build the kind of movement that you want to see, to build the kind of organization that you want to see. Don't just scream on Twitter all day long about how AOC isn't the socialist messiah that you wanted her to be. Don't just retweet Ryan Knight and Jimmy Dore and just be like, well, they should force the vote, but not like that. Organize. Go talk to your fucking friends and family and neighbors. Donate some of your time or your money. Do something. Do anything materially. Don't just post about it. Posting isn't bad. It's just nowhere near enough. You're signing petitions that nobody asks for and nobody looks at, effectively. You're screaming into the void. And yeah, sometimes other people hear that scream, and it's cathartic to scream together, and it's nice, echo chambers can be nice, but you do not put change into place by contradicting efforts that you see are not good enough. You put change in a place by taking efforts that are not good enough and improving on them and innovating on them and building off of them. You don't get to be spoiled and just say, well, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, and not be working toward good enough. I promise you, what's out there, it's not good enough. And it's never going to change itself to be good enough. Not spontaneously, not passively. If you're looking at something and it's not good enough, and you want it to be better, one of the only ways it's going to be better is by engaging with it, participating in it, and taking some degree of ownership over it. Really just motivating myself here. At this point, I should take some of my own fucking advice. Yeah, I haven't been as active within my local DSA chapter as I would have liked, for the aforementioned reasons of there be a plague going on, so I've just been providing money when I can, and really just, like, listening, but not doing. I should be doing more. I look forward to, hopefully, in the not-so-far future, doing that more actively. Like, oh my god, I would love to be spending my days, like, actually organizing people, getting people signed up for socialist, leftist organizations, or just feeding people, housing people, helping mitigate the humane crises that we're having, rather than scrolling on Twitter and just seeing the new dumb shit that Ryan Knight has posted, or the new weird thing that Jimmy Dore is going off on, or, oh, it turns out that this guy with a podcast is actually bad. This white guy with a podcast, turns out he's problematic. Wow, who could have seen this coming? Crazy, whoa. Oh, this guy who was a contractor and has a record of human smuggling, denies that it happened, even though it definitely happened, and that's what we're talking about, that's what we care about today. Like, Jesus Christ, it's all so unproductive. Leftist infighting is not the problem. It's the fact that motherfuckers will not get off the hell bird site and actually do something. I mean literally anything. I feel like there should be a fucking tax for signing into Twitter. Just a $1 tax. Hey, have you donated to a local progressive cause? No? $1. $1 gets you an hour on Twitter. Like, at least be fucking carbon taxing yourself here. And carbon taxes don't work. No, what's the stupid thing where you can buy carbon exchange? Oh my god, what the fuck is it called? Cap and trade. Cap and trade is this dumbass notion that, oh, we cap our emissions, and then if emissions exceed this capacity, we then have a self-inflicted tax that we pay to people who are underneath that capacity. Basically political cap and trade. If you're just gonna go post online and be extremely online all the fucking time, you better be providing substantial fucking support financially to people who are doing things materially. If you are not doing the work yourself, you better be putting the fucking majority of your leisure money into people who are actually doing the work. Not in buying a house, not in investing in whatever meme stock there is, not in buying whatever meme coin there is, not in even getting yourself like nice shit or going out to eat, I'll be honest with you, fuck you. If if you really care in your heart of hearts, as so many people seem to, put your fucking wallet where your mouth is. Better yet, put your hands where your mouth is and do something. Okay. Alright, that's enough screaming into the void and being unproductive. I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to get off of here. I'm gonna have breakfast. I haven't done that yet. I'm gonna get off of here. I'm gonna have breakfast. I'm gonna donate to... I don't know. I'm gonna have to look. I'm torn between, like, my local DSA chapter who are actually doing okay and don't... Well, I mean, we always need the money, but... Need is a strong word, or maybe a mutual aid group here. This isn't me virtue signaling. This is just me being like, hey, you know, I've just spent the better part of 62 minutes bitching about leftists online. The least I can do is at least adhere to this flimsy rule of, if you're gonna bitch about leftists online, pay $1 tax. So I'm gonna go, and I'm not paying $1. I'm gonna pay more because people have sent me Easter money, which I don't want and didn't ask for, and I don't practice your religion anymore. So I'm just gonna go give my Easter money away to people who need it more. Oh God, who the fuck is calling me at 5 in the morning? My mom. Huh, okay, well, until later, I'm gonna say toodaloo, take care, see you then.